colorful quilters, and welcome to Color Girl Quilts on YouTube. I am Sharon and I'm so happy that you're here to sew with me today. I wanted to show you a baby quilt that I just made for a friend with some newer fabrics that I had in the shop. I wanted to do something kind of bold and graphic and not a really traditional baby quilt. So I went with these really primary, bright, happy colors with the black solid. So I'm super happy with how it turns out because I think this is such a cute block. It's very modern, but also very simple and easy to sew. So great news. I'm going to show you how to make this block, but super easily with the kitty corner ruler. So I saw these on Creative Grids. It is designed by Deb Heatherly, and it is a brilliant ruler designed to make this basic shape. You do these squares here that look like this, okay? And then you make 4 of them to make a star. Okay, so the thing is that you can do a lot more with these. So if you're interested in seeing more patterns to use these rulers for, visit Deb Heatherly's website. I will put a link to it in the comments of this video. But I want to show you the basics of how to use the ruler to make a simple star, and hopefully it'll inspire you to go from there. Okay, so look for these fabrics and also the kitty corner ruler in the colorgirlquilts.com shop, and I'll be happy to send you one to make this fun quilt. Okay, so let's get started. For mine, I had some 10-inch squares. So in my case, it was a layer cake from Moda Fabrics. That I had gotten to go with the fabrics that I got in the shop so that I could make a quilt with them to show all of my customers how cute these fabrics are. So I had 10-inch squares. You can start with whatever you want. The ruler includes an instruction sheet with a table that tells you the sizes for your finished block. So I didn't mention this before, but the ruler actually makes these blocks in a whole bunch of sizes. So you can do all the way from 1-inch ones, little itty bitty squares, all the way to 6-inch ones. So a 6-inch square would then make a 12-inch star block. Okay, so the measurements on the chart in the instructions are for the size of the individual squares, this unit right here. Okay, so if I go to my chart and knowing the fabric that I have to work with, my unit A is going to be a 5-inch square because I'm going to cut my layer cake squares into 4s to make 4 5-inch squares. And that's what's going to make my star shapes. Okay, so I'm going to find on the unit A, if I cut a 5-inch square, I'm going to end up with a 4-inch finished square. So this unit will be 4 inches. Okay, so I went ahead and cut my layer cake squares into 4 5-inch squares. And then for the black and white pieces, which I'm doing a little bit of a variation on my original quilt so you can see what it looks like not having a solid color background. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But so these background pieces, the half rectangle triangles, those are going to be unit B. And if I'm making a 4-inch finished block, my unit B's need to be cut 3.5 by 5 1/4 inches. So I have gone ahead and cut here 2 rectangles, one from white, one from black to get started, and they are 3.5 inches by 5 1/4. Okay, so that's going to get you off to a good start. Go ahead and cut some 5-inch squares, cut 4 5-inch squares, and then to make your blocks like mine, you would need 4 rectangles that are 3.5 by 5.25 in whatever color you want your background to be. Okay, so now is the fun part where we are going to go ahead and work with our kitty corner ruler to cut our shapes. Okay, so let's start with our 5-inch squares. And to cut those, like I mentioned before with our ruler, the square piece is going to end up being the A piece of our block. So it turns out to be kind of a kite shape. Okay, so if we want to keep this one here to look at, the A piece is the kite-shaped piece. Okay, so your first step is to fold your square in half diagonally and crease it. And you can press it if you want it to be really flat, but it's not required. And then take your ruler, and you see where this says shape A, cutting A units, and you have a dotted line here that runs along on an angle of the ruler toward the corner that says step 1. So place your step 1 corner on one of the folded corners of your fabric, and the fold of the fabric is going to be along that dotted line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and then just cut on the edge of the ruler. So that gives me scraps that are triangles and my kite shape. Okay, so you're going to need to cut 4 of these to make your star block. And then for your B shape, your half rectangle triangle, you have the other side of the ruler is for the B shape. And see where it says cutting B units? So step 2, it's kind of handy. They've got step 1 and step 2. And step 2, once again, you line that up with the long edge of your rectangle. So this is the 5.25 inch edge lined up with that line. And then step 2 corner is at the corner, but it's kind of a little blunted cut corner here. Can you see that? And then from there, I'm going to cut again on the edge of the ruler. All right, and that gives me 2 half rectangle triangles. And step 3 is to then line the ruler up with that point and just trim off that little corner. That's going to help you later on with your piecing to line up your these B pieces with your A kite shapes. Okay, so just cut those off. All right, and then you're going to repeat that step with 3 more rectangles so that you have a total of 8 of these little B triangles. And of course, you've already cut 4 of the A kite shapes. Okay, so your next step is to line these up for sewing. And I wanted to show you guys the blocks that I'm working on for my sample here. You saw in the quilt that I made that I did all of the background pieces with black. Okay, so you can see what that looks like. I wanted to show you an example of making them in 2 colors. I am particularly fond of black and white. If you've been watching these videos for very long, you know that I love black and white. So I decided to make one that's kind of a 2-tone. And what happens with this is that you have a couple of options. You can alternate them so that you get the black and white shapes like that. And it just adds another element of pattern to your quilt. You can also turn them so that the blacks and the whites line up, and it gives you a shape it gives you these full diamond shapes in black and white. And what will happen is you'll have like a row of black ones going horizontally across your quilt and a row of white ones going vertically. So that's kind of a fun design. This one creates more of a sort of busy, kind of psychedelic look, where you kind of get a pinwheel shape where these interact with each other. And as I'm looking at this could really be an interesting secondary design if you took out the busyness of the star shapes and maybe made them all the same color, and then used these shapes as more the emphasis on your quilt. So just another option there to play around with color placement. Okay, and then so to make your blocks like this, you will need to cut two black rectangles and 2 white rectangles so that you have a total of 4 of each color. And what you'll do is sew 1 to each side of each of your pieces. But it is important to remember when you're doing this that you notice with these blocks that these are actually mirror image of each other. So when you're laying out your pieces to sew, make sure that you're paying attention to the placement of having these mirror image. You can't just sew them all the same. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's an option for you. Another option is to ignore the mirror image concept and create even more variety with your blocks. Now for these, I sewed all of the blocks, all of the units the same, so they all have the same position of black and white. They are not mirror image. Okay, and what happens is that you get another kind of secondary shape when you put these together. The black and white create a different pattern. You see where that's going? You get kind of a checkerboard effect in the background. And again, I said psychedelic before. I think this one is even more kind of trippy, right? So that gives you sort of a diamond checkerboard pattern. But then here again, you can see secondary patterns coming together between, say, these 4 units right here, right? So let's say instead of doing these black and white, what if you did all of these the same color and created kind of this little like shamrock shape, I guess you'd say. So this is going to be a fun design for you to take a really simple block and do a lot of playing with it and come up with an interesting pattern. So even though the basic block is really simple with just the kite shape and the half square triangle, you can really do a lot of things with the way you place your colors to create different designs. So hopefully that kind of gets you excited for trying something with these shapes. But in the meantime, let's finish up making one of these units so that you'll be ready to go on your own. Alrighty, so if this is going to be the layout of my pieces, the first thing I'm going to do is take one of my triangles and turn it right sides facing the A shape. And do you see where we cut that little corner off? That's where that lines up with the edge of the fabric. So it really makes it easy for you to see how that lines up. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and sew along this angled edge and press it. And here we are at our last step. We need to trim and square our block units so that they are all the same and straight and will fit together perfectly when we sew them together. And for this step, we'll also use our kitty corner ruler, and you'll see that there are measurements with squares and lines for each size block you can make. So it starts with 1 inch, and then it goes every ½ inch up to 6 inches. And keep in mind that these numbers are the finished size of your block. Okay, it's not the actual measurement. Your squares will actually be a ½ inch larger than this to account for seam allowance. So if you remember back when we were cutting our fabrics at the beginning of this video, I said we were going to make 4-inch finished blocks. So we are going to use the 4-inch squaring up line. Okay, so keep that in mind, that you're looking at your finished block size when you trim your squares. Okay, so I've got my 4-inch line here, and then also handy, there's markings at the corner of the ruler that are perfect for lining up with the seams on your piecing so that you know you're putting it in the right place to trim. Okay, so if I take these little angled lines and place them over the point of my fabric where I've pieced the colors and the black and whites together. Got that. And then my 4-inch lines are here. So I'm going to cut a perfect square out of my block, out of my pieced unit. And if I do all of them the same way like this, then I know that they are going to turn out the same, with the same amount of seam allowance outside my point, the same distance as here, so that they will fit together and my seams will match. So super easy trimming up. Once I've cut those first 2 sides, I'll turn my piece over and line up the 4-inch lines with the sides that I already cut, because I know those are where I want them to be. Once those are lined up, then I'll cut the remaining 2 sides, and that gives me a nice, neat square with perfect amount of seam allowance and ready to sew it to my other pieces and make my blocks. Okay, friends, what do you think? Is this a new shape for you? It's a new shape for me, and I think it's a lot of fun to imagine all the possibilities that you can do with such a simple little building block. You can get a lot of different designs just by moving your colors around, changing the arrangement of the shapes, and using contrast. So I hope that this has given you some ideas to maybe try your own, playing around with the kitty corner ruler, and think of all of the quilts that you can make just by rearranging and playing with this shape. So super easy ruler to use. I love that it's an all-in-one where you cut the shapes like I showed you. It says step 1, step 2, super easy to use. And then it also has the squaring up lines. So you can make your block units start to finish with this one ruler. So hope you've enjoyed making these and feel inspired to maybe try something new. So tell me what you think if you're going to try out the kitty corner ruler and make some of these cute star shapes, or even go your own way and figure out a totally original design for them. Please like and subscribe to Color Girl Quilt on YouTube and leave comments as much as you can. I also appreciate it if you would help me continue making videos like this by shopping at colorgirlquilts.com when you need fabric or patterns for your next quilt project. Okay, thanks for sewing along with me today, and see you next time.